And, and I may not have. Okay, here we go. Now you can come in. Sorry.
It's all good. Hello, everybody. My name is Michaelis, and I'm definitely an alcoholic. Jay, thank you so much for asking me to speak. It's definitely an honor and a privilege to be able to participate in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But Jay, I love you very much. I remember seeing your face at the log cabin in the mornings, and you're just such a welcoming spirit. And the fact that you always remember my AA birthday and send me a message on Facebook really touches me. So I'm very grateful for you to be in my life. Um, if there's newcomers here, I'd like to welcome you. It's really a miracle that you made it. I hope that you stay. And I'm basically sober today because of the grace of God and the miracle of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason I say that is not because I'm a circus speaker and that's some can pitched nonsense, but those words actually mean something to me. And the idea of this being a miracle program really comes from this piece in the big book uh, where it starts just talking about how if we were alcoholics, we really had no hope before the 12 steps got started. Our only options were to die or go to prison or get locked away in asylums or be homeless or be miserable. I mean, it wasn't looking good for us. And, Carl Jung, who was one of the greatest psychological minds in the world, his best suggestion for an alcoholic like me was basically to hire a bodyguard to watch me 24 hours a day or lock myself away at an asylum. Like that was the best solutions from the best minds in the world. And I don't know about you guys, but when I got sober, I was 22 and pretty homeless, and I just couldn't afford a bodyguard to watch me 24 hours a day. That would have been very expensive for me. And if I had that money, it was definitely going to alcohol or something else. So I'm very grateful that no matter what happens in this world, AA has made itself accessible to me. Even in the COVID times, we just got right on Zoom, and I've been able to work with people all over the world because of this process, and I have another chance at life. And I say that I'm sober because of the grace of God, is because I have absolutely nothing to do with my sobriety or my life at all. And to illustrate that, at the end of my use, I was looking at going to prison for 25 years to life on a third strike in California. Because back in the 90s, I don't know if they're still doing it. If got a violent felony, every, subsequent felony after that was a strike. If you get three strikes, you get 25 to life. And so there I was, sitting in the men's county jail in downtown Los Angeles. I just been told that that was on the table. The DA was pushing for the 25 years to life. And I just thought I was done, you know? And across the hall from my lawyer's office was this man named Bob Timmons. And Bob Timmons was a lot of things back in the day, but um, his effect in my life was he was kind of like one of the original sober companions, right? So he used to travel with different bands on tour and do sober things and travel with different actors on set and do more sober things. But the miracle of it was he happened to be in town this one day that my parents were talking to the lawyer. And he happened to overhear the conversation between my parents and the lawyer. And he happened to make a decision to go see if he could help. And he happened to come and visit me in Men's County Jail to see whether or not I thought I was an addict. And he also happened to have a direct relationship with my judge because he had gotten my judge's son sober 2 years prior. And he's able to talk my judge in reducing my sentence from 25 years to life to 6 months in treatment in jail, where I was introduced to the 12 steps, and then a year court commitment to his sober living. Now, did I have anything to do with any of that? Absolutely not. That was just the universe conspiring in my favor, as it always does and always has. I just couldn't see it before. And the cool thing about the 12 steps or the AA program is that we get to come up with our own concept of God, right? So to me, the word God in and of itself doesn't really mean anything. It's very abstract. It's like the idea of love. Like I can mention love to somebody and they can think of puppies, they can think of divorce, they can think of sex, they can think of, their partner, they can think of all kinds of different things. So God is kind of the same idea. It's like our own concept. And to me, one of the lessons that I learned from that situation with Bob Timmons was that even when I'm at my worst, my most selfish, my most dishonest, my most manipulative, my most violently aggressive, something is still loving me, wanting the best for me, and taking care of me no matter what. So to me, that seemed like a logical choice in terms of applying that as my concept of God, a universe that loves me unconditionally, wants the best for me, and takes care of me no matter what. Because it doesn't seem a logical choice today to pick a life of conflict, to pick a life of anxiety, to pick a life of depression or jealousy or anger or fear. I don't know how long I'm going to be here on this earth. You know, it's definitely indefinite. So while I'm here, I want to enjoy it to the best of my ability, right? And to enjoy it, believing in a God that loves me, wants the best for me, and takes care of me no matter what, that means that I don't have to worry about my future because that's obviously taken care of. It means that I don't have to have a bunch of shame and guilt and regret of my past because obviously I was loved through that. But it also means that, and I hear this in the room sometimes, accepting life on life's terms, which I understand that, but for me, that's almost a limited belief. I'd rather choose to believe that every single situation that's presented to me in each moment is perfectly designed for me. So you won't hear me just parroting things that we hear in AA if they don't make any sense to me. And I want to live the best life that I possibly can. So that's why that's a logical choice. Now, I said that I'm alcoholic. I have to be quite honest with you. When I got sober and I came to meetings, the fellowship really confused me about what an alcoholic was. And what I mean by that is it seemed like almost like a very strange personality disorder or something, mixed with consequences and feelings and thoughts. And what I mean by that is I heard about consequences like jails, institutions, and death. That makes me an alcoholic. I heard things about trauma is the root of alcoholism or addiction. I heard stuff like that. I heard stuff about like, feeling uncomfortable in my own skin. That's alcoholism. I heard about, being dishonest, manipulative, violent, not being able to trust your thinking, all that being under sort of the umbrella of alcoholism. And thank God I read the big book because it kind of took all that stuff away and it really simplified the definition of alcoholism for me. And the doctor's opinion is really where I found the diagnosis for alcoholism. And it said that as an alcoholic, I have one symptom in common with other alcoholics. Now, they talk about a threefold illness, but really what he's saying is that the body aspect is the only thing that defines me as an alcoholic. And what I mean by the body aspect is I'm talking about the physical allergy to drugs and alcohol. If I put a drink or a drug in my body, I literally do not know what's going to happen next. Now, the word allergy is used almost metaphorically. It's like an allergy. An allergy really means abnormal reaction, right? Because I can't, test for alcoholism with like a scratch test or, look at antibodies and stuff like that. But it's more of like a experiential thing of like what happens to me when I drink and use. Now, how I have this abnormal reaction, and the abnormal reaction for me is characterized by when I put drugs or alcohol in my body, it triggers a craving beyond my mental control, beyond my intention, beyond my desires. It doesn't matter what I have going on in my life or what I don't have going on in my life. It just takes me for a run. Now, how I know I have this is that when I was out there drinking and using, the universe was still conspiring in my favor. It was still trying to give me opportunities, things that I wanted to show up for, and things that I was very excited about, and probably more excited in a desperate way because I had felt like such a, excuse my language, but piece of shit on the inside. I really felt less than. So when the universe provided me an opportunity, it was really my opportunity to prove to myself and to the world around me that I was important. So I had a lot of energy and urgency to make that stuff happen. So I'd hear about this opportunity from, whoever out in the world. I'd be excited about it. I'd call my friends about it. They'd be excited for me. And they'd say, hey, let's go and celebrate the opportunity. I'd say, hey, great, let's go celebrate. And me and my friends would go out that one night, and that one night would turn to 4 months later of drug and alcohol use and another jail sentence. Now, was that my intention? No, absolutely not my intention, but it did not matter what my intention was. It did not matter what my purposes was. It didn't matter what my loves or desires were. As soon as I put the drugs and alcohol in my body, I did not know what's going to happen. So that's like one vague story of a million stories in my life. But that was really the pinpoint for me of really understanding that, because I was very young when I got sober. I was attracted to the lifestyle that I was living at that time. And I didn't really have, because I was in so much delusion, a lot of this wanting to stop but can't. And also, I've never had the experience of relapse. So I really needed to look at how I drank and used, when I drank and used, to be able to pinpoint that abnormal reaction. So I don't think that I crossed a line into becoming an alcoholic. I don't think I had one too many or anything like that. But really, I think that everybody, since I work with a lot of people, has a different rate of progression, right? Some people's allergy are more aggressive than others. Like my wife, for instance, she had a very aggressive allergy. She was a blackout drinker. She started drinking when she was 11, and she got sober just before her 17th birthday. So it was a very fast run for her. Then there are some people who, I don't know, seemingly moderate for years. Maybe they're binge drinkers or periodics, and sometimes the binges might get worse, and the health issues might get worse with the binges, or the binges last longer than they're intended, or whatever, right? So everybody has a different rate of progression because there's everything else in between. Now, the thing is that I think I was born with this thing, which kind of leads me to this other piece of the allergy, which is that it's never going away. That's the other piece. I'm never getting rid of it. So that means that I can go to all the psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists around the world and heal all the trauma and understand the inner workings of my mind and feel really good about myself. But if I pick up a drink or a drug, I am screwed. It also means that I can study with all these different gurus at different ashrams around the world and do year-long meditation fasts and be really skinny and spiritual. But if I pick up a drink or a drug, I am screwed. I'm never getting rid of it. I'm never healing out of it. And that's it. And that's the piece that defines me as an alcoholic, which means, should there be a stigma against alcoholism? Like, I didn't choose to have this allergy. Like, it's not my fault, you know? And it really has nothing to do with the behaviors, the actions. It just has to do with the craving beyond my mental control. Um, okay, so that's what defines me as an alcoholic. Now we have the two other sides, right? So we have mental obsession and we have spiritual malady. Now, the mental obsession, as I heard described in the fellowship, was, this incessant thinking about drinking and using all the time. But the truth was, is that wasn't my experience, because I was hanging out with people who were manufacturing the drug of choice that I had. So if I wanted to get high, I would just reach over the table and pick up a shard, throw it in a pipe and smoke it. But that's not really the mental obsession as it's described in the book. The mental obsession in the book really is the ability to believe a lie. The lie that I believe in the end is that I do not have the allergy, right? Which is why I would pick up in the end, right? And the reason why I say the end game lie is because I believe a bunch of lies that lead me to this end game lie. Like, for instance, it's just a sip of champagne at a friend's wedding. It's not a big deal. Or I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the system is out to get me. Or it's not the selling drugs, it's a problem. It's the using drugs, it's a problem. Or that relationship is really the issue. Or Los Angeles is definitely a problem. Or, I have friends of mine who are microdosing mushrooms and ketamine to treat their anxiety and depression today. Maybe that sounds like a good idea, because if I'm going to a doctor and they've got letters after their name and it's in the office, my body's going to know the difference when I ingest those things that I used to abuse. Or I have friends of mine who are next leveling their spiritual awakening by going on ayahuasca journeys with Shaman Chad in North Hills. Maybe that sounds like a really good idea. Because his patchouli oil is very expensive, and he's got, tapestries from Peru in his house. I don't know, whatever. So he must seem legit. Like, these are the things that my head would tell me. That's the ability to believe a lie. Also, sometimes these lies have absolutely nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. I can go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can see somebody that I've known for over 20 years, right? And I can wave to them from across the meeting, and they don't wave back. And they didn't see me, but I didn't know they didn't see me. And then I sit in my chair and I think to myself, I had just lunch. I just had lunch with him last week. Why didn't he wait back to me? Wait a second. I paid for that lunch. I've known this guy for over 20 years. Like, what's his problem? And then I started inventorying the relationship and I'd start seeking, like, where did I screw this guy over? I didn't do anything for him, you know? And then by the end of the meeting, I'm like, screw this guy and screw this meeting and screw AA. And I've completely fabricated a story in my mind that has absolutely nothing to do with reality. Sometimes these lies are very plausible. I remember when I was around 10 years of sobriety, I thought to myself, Michaelis, you were 22 years old when you got sober. And at the time when I was 10 years sober, I was DJing a bunch of nightclubs in Hollywood. And I was looking out in the crowd and I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm seeing a bunch of 22 to 25-year-olds. And what are they doing? They're drinking and they're getting high. Maybe that's just what 22-year-olds do. And then I thought to myself, you know, when things got really dark for you in sobriety in your first 10 years, you never wanted to drink or use. You know, maybe you're not really an alcoholic. What you wanted to do is you wanted to kill yourself. And then I thought to myself, oh, Michaelis, when you were 17 years old, you and your mom tried to kill yourselves together, like a double suicide. So there's that trauma piece. And so basically, what my brain did was it strung all these little pieces of information together to say, maybe it was just a phase. Maybe you're not even really an alcoholic. And if I'd gone to a therapist with that, they probably would have, you know, said, hey, let's heal your trauma, handed me some antidepressants, and sent me on my merry way. And then I would have been screwed because I would have believed that lie, picked up a drink or a drug down the line, and you wouldn't be seeing me here today. So that's all the ability to believe a lie. Now, do I think that only alcoholics and addicts have the ability to believe a lie? Absolutely not. I think that is part of the human condition. And to sort of understand that, usually something I would say is if you don't think that everybody has the ability to believe a lie, just go on social media. You'll see people lying themselves all day. But what I'll say is this. In order to understand the ability to believe a lie, I needed to understand what the truth was, right? And for me, it's funny how this came to me was I was living in Bali for about 7 years, from the time I was, I think, 14 years of sobriety to 21 years of sobriety. And Bali has a very transient community. And I met a lot of interesting people there. And I met some people there who were French nobles who like escaped their family. And they started talking to me about this Illuminati stuff, right? And I was intrigued. So, of course, I go into my house and I go into this deep dive in conspiracy theory and Illuminati stuff. And basically, I spent hours and hours and hours trying to find the truth, seeking the truth, right? And I don't know if any of you guys have ever researched anything on in the internet, but what I found was for every 10 articles that said one thing, there's 10 articles that disprove it. And I found that there's no fucking seeking the truth, right? So then I thought, okay, I'm sitting in my house, indoors, in Bali, on a paradise island. I live in this all glass teakwood house. The ocean is 5 minutes away from me. There's this epic jungle of a garden that I have. Why am I in my room? Why am I on my device? The truth is now. The truth is actually what's in front of me. That is the absolute only thing that I could be sure of is now. That is the truth, right? So if I look at the truth is that I'm just sitting in my living room looking at a bunch of squares on a computer, and I'm not making reference to your guys' character. I don't know you that well, but nothing's going on. There's no politics in here right now. There's no war in here right now. There's no COVID right now. There's no bills to pay right now or people to appease. Like everything is good right now in this moment. This is the truth, right? So any story that I would tell myself that takes me out of this moment is essentially a lie. Now, when they talk about in the big book about launching ourselves into the fourth dimension of resistance, the fourth dimension is really the intersection of space and time. It's the absolute now. And what they describe that is heaven on earth. Because if I look at really what's happening in front of me right now, there's no reason, there's no logical reason for me to feel anything but peace. There's no reason for me to feel fear or depressed or self-pity or anger or anything because I'm just chilling right now. And the more time I can spend in the truth, the less time I spend in the lie, right? So if you think about the truth in that way, then you see that most human beings have a really hard time living in the truth, therefore believing lies, right? The spiritual malady. The spiritual malady always confused me. When I went to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I heard a lot of stories about that. A scream without a mouth sounds very poetic. And I heard weird shit like it's like a God-sized hole that you're trying to fit a bunch of stuff in. And truthfully, that sounds a little inappropriate to me today. It didn't age well in 2024. But the best way for me to describe the spiritual malady is really just emotional unmanageability, right? It's anxiety, it's the depression, it's the fear, it's the worries, the jealousy, it's the anger. It's the feeling lost and it's the feeling hopeless. It's a feeling completely alone in a room full of people that love me. It's a feeling like every single person on this earth got some sort of manual about how to function and exist successfully in this world, but the God was like, screw you, Michaelis, figure it out. That's spiritual malady. Now, do I think that only alcoholics and addicts experience those feelings? Absolutely not. I think that's part of the human condition too. So really, I'm describing two pieces that just make me a human being, which is usually where the stigma is attached to, and then one simple piece that describes me as an alcoholic, which is just the allergy. How it all works together for me is very simple. I believe a story in my head that's not rooted in truth. It has nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. It's just a story that I'm telling myself in my head, right? Then I have a feeling that's attached to that story. And now, because I have a feeling with it, it feels real. I believe that story. And then, if there's no intervention on that, I just build more stories and more feelings and more stories and more feelings until I'm the guy that wakes up in the morning next to my beautiful wife. I open up my eyes in my bed and I think to myself, Michaelis, you're a piece of shit. You're a fraud. People are talking shit about you running a cult. Nobody likes you. Nobody appreciates you. The world is going to end. What's the point? Right? When the truth is that I just opened up my eyes and I'm in my bed and nothing's going on. So when I'm in that much story and that much emotional unmanageability, I'm susceptible to that endgame lie, which might look like maybe a drink or a drug might fix this, or you got sober really young. Maybe it wasn't even really a problem, or, maybe the mushrooms and ketamine might be a cool solution for you, or, no one's really getting addicted to ayahuasca. So maybe that's okay, which later working with people, I found out is not true, but, or the worst one, for me, I think, is the one where I don't think at all. And I just casually am out in the world, pick up a drink or a drug, and then I'm gone. That to me is the scariest one. And once I ingest that drugs or alcohol, that's when real powerlessness ensues. That's where I lose the power of choice. And that's where, it's running me. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And it's funny, in the doctor's opinion, they talk about like the nature of the spree, they talk about emerging remorseful. But what I've seen is that that's not a guarantee that we get to emerge. So many of my friends are dying. That is the reality of it. So if we're lucky, we get to emerge remorseful, but that's a blessing. This is not a revolving door. So when people say that in the meetings, it's like, yeah, if it's revolving for you, blessed. So many people, it's not that way. So many people never make it back, especially today. So that's alcoholism. Now, when I got sober, I went to a very structured sober living home, and they made me and made sure that I did all the things that people in AA were suggesting to me, which was go to 90 meetings in 30 days, get a sponsor, work the steps, call your sponsor every single day, get your inventory done in a timely manner, make sure you make all your amends, pray every single morning and every single night, get commitments, all that stuff, right? And I thought that, after I worked steps 1 through 11, I would have had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and I was going to be some sort of shining beacon light of spiritual light. I can go to meetings now, and at the sponsorship announcements, because I had acquired the authentication of the person who's making the sponsorship announcements, anyone who's worked all 12 steps and willing to sponsor, I would raise my hand and people would recognize my shine and they would flock to me because they wanted what I had, And I did work with people, but that wasn't really my experience. And the truth is that I didn't really feel the shine, Not really. And so what I thought I needed to do when, life started getting uncomfortable for me, because I did have some sort of like, oh, newly sober kind of excitement about being out of jail and being in the world and making new friends and having a new life of hope for me. But that dwindled for me probably around year 2 or 3. So I got another sponsor, started to work the steps again, wanting to have a new experience with it, thinking that that was going to shift it. And a lot of my step work had to do with, maybe reading and writing with a sponsor, personalizing a step with myself through some writing, reading it to my sponsor, and my sponsor felt I was ready, I would be moved on to the next step, right? And so on and so on. And I put a lot of emphasis on my inventories because I thought it was a program of self-knowledge. That if I just understood myself better, I would have a better understanding of 6 and 7 and what defects of character that I was in charge of removing through contrary action. And again, that did not work. And so I did this for my first 10 years of sobriety, 9.5 years of sobriety. And it was really, it got really dark for me. Now, what I'll tell you is this, and I need to make this disclaimer because people get really upset with me, like what I'm about to tell them is the only way. If calling a sponsor every single day is working for you and you're happy, good, do it, keep doing it. If going to meetings every single day is working for you and you're happy, great, keep doing that. If writing a gratitude list on a text chain is like what makes you happy, do that. If you find connection through God just through prayer and meditation, do that stuff. Like, I'm not trying to say that what I'm talking about is the only way, but what I'm saying is I tried all these different ways and they did not work for me, right? Just, it just didn't work for me. And what wound up happening was is that 6.5 years of sobriety, I tried to kill myself. And also 5.5 years of sobriety, I tried to kill myself. And I didn't understand why. And the reason why I had gotten to such a dark place is because I was doing all of this step work. I was doing all these inventories. I was going to all these meetings. I was following all these directions and I still wasn't feeling better. I still wasn't feeling connected and I could not understand why. And it was really a dark place for me. So um, if you guys are feeling dark, if you guys have a hard time staying sober, then what I'm about to say, I hope you investigate because it changed my absolute life entirely. So I met with this guy around 9.5 years sober. And it was just after I had this big drama with my previous sponsor. And I wasn't looking for a new sponsor. I wasn't really looking for even a new experience, but it was suggested to me that I try that. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to give this one last ditch effort and see if this thing works. So I called this guy who I'd never met before, to my knowledge. He'd actually seen me speak at a meeting 3 weeks prior, and he was like really weird to me. He walked up to me when he thanked me to speak, and he just said, "You're anointed," and I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, okay, whatever, fucking weirdo. But anyway, I wind up calling this guy, and he's like, okay, get a hardcover 4th edition big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and pen and a highlighter and meet me at my house at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So I was like, okay, cool, great, let's do this. So I get to his house. It's 8:02. I knock on the door. He opens the door. He says, "You're late." He slams the door, and that was our first meeting. And I was like, okay, great. Me with my 9.5 years, I'm like, okay, this guy is trying to humble me. Okay, cool, get it, whatever. So I call him back. I'm like, I'm sorry I was late. He's like, yep, come back next week. I said, fine. So I went back next week. I was there at 7:59, right on time. And the first thing that he had me write in the big book was, God, take away everything I think I know about this book, about this process, and about you, God, so that I can have an experience with you. And I've heard many variations of the set aside prayer up to this point, but not one this simple and this succinct. And really, what I understood was I needed to take away everything I thought I know about the book. So I'd read the book multiple times. The process, which was not only the process of why I'm going to meetings, what they're for, what a sponsor's role is, what their job is, like me as a sponsor, just what it even means to work the steps, everything. I needed to let it all go And I also needed to let go when I started working with others of what I thought the process of that session with that person was. So I was open-minded to just being able to be present. I'm going to explain why. But then the idea of like letting go of everything that I thought I knew about God so I could actually have an experience with God. And this is where I really came up with that concept that I described in the beginning, because my experience really in life is rooted in my thoughts and feelings. You know, that's what dictates my experience with life. So I really need to ask myself, if I'm going to come up with a concept of God, is how do I want to feel? And how I wanted to feel was I just wanted to feel at peace. I wanted to feel loved at all times, you know? So that's why I was like, okay, cool. I just want to know that I'm loved unconditionally, that I'm wanted the best for, and that I'm taken care of no matter what. And it wasn't just a concept that I was making up out of air, although I think that that is just as efficient, because if you think about all the self-loathing talk, like messaging in my head, that's equally as fictitious. So if I'm going to believe a story, it's better to believe the story of hope than it is to believe the story of fear. They're all stories. So anyway, the point is that if I want to feel peace, that's the kind of God that I needed, right? So I had a concept that I was working towards. And like I said, I had evidence of that working in my life. So it wasn't out of thin air. Next thing he had me write was, God, please bury my pride before my pride buries me, which was a very useful tool that I used for years after that and continue to. Like before this meeting, that's the first prayer that I said in my head was, God, please bear my pride before my pride buries me. So I'm sure that I'm not speaking my message, it's thus the message, right? I'm not any more important than anybody else in this room. The next thing he talked about was, you know, alcoholism is a disease of the body, mind, and spirit. There are three parts of the program, one for each part of my disease. So I just explained to you alcoholism, disease of the body, mind, and spirit, highlighting that the thing that defines me as an alcoholic is the allergy, and that the body and, excuse me, and that the mind and the spirit part are part of the human condition and how it all works together. But this is the kicker. So there are three parts of the program, one to treat each part of the disease. So I'd seen Unity Serves Recovery on this circle and triangle for years, right? See it on all the coins, see it on the banners, see it everywhere, right? And truthfully, I thought it was like some weird nod to the Illuminati, like we're in some secret society thing, whatever. But the truth is that like those things actually have meaning, and they're actually the, you know, legacies or the functions of this program, right? So what he explained to me was that the unity is what I use to treat the body. Now, the body part, remember, is the allergy, right? So what that means is that the unity is found in the fellowship. So when I'm hanging out at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous around other 12-step sober people, and it's important that they're 12 steps sober, we're not talking about the uncles that throw a few back on the weekend on the boat or whatever that they do out there in the lake, but I'm talking about 12-step sober people. When I'm hanging out with 12-step sober people in my backyard or out at a coffee shop, or I mean, I basically live in a sober living because me and my wife are sober, right? Whenever I'm hanging out with a 12-step sober person, I'm not at the bar, I'm not at the liquor store, I'm not isolating alone home getting high and drunk, I'm not at the dealer's house, and I'm not in the crack house on the crack couch doing weird crack stuff with crack people. So if I don't put my body in a position to ingest drugs and alcohol, guess what? I don't trigger the allergy. Problem solved, which is why they tell people who are new to go to 90 meetings in 30 days so they stay physically sober long enough to hear a message. Now, he told me that the way that I treat my mind is with the recovery side of the triangle. And he was very clear that the recovery is not found in the meetings. It's not found out of the sponsor. It's not found out of any particular human being. It's found out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not because he was a Bible thumping weirdo, and nor am I. But the truth is that, look, the big book was published in 1939. It sold millions of copies and yielded millions of recoveries all over the world, so much that they haven't changed it since they wrote it, right? It is the purest form of all 12-step message. I don't know any speaker that's yielded millions of recoveries around the world. I don't know any sponsor like that either, right? So it is the program. Now, it treats my mind in two different ways, because it treats my mind as an alcoholic, but it also treats my mind as a human being. Now, the way it treats my mind as an alcoholic is very simple. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is a lot of things, but it's also a diagnostic tool, right? So deep dives in the allergy, in the doctor's opinion, talks more about it, and there's a solution, a little bit about it, more about alcoholism. But in more about alcoholism, it deep dives into the thinking that precedes a relapse into drinking. So if I'm in the big book every single day with another human being, because it's not a book that you just read alone by yourself, it's a textbook, right? Textbooks are found in schools. Schools have two major roles. Those two major roles are teachers and students. So, basically every big book reading needs a teacher and student vibe in that, right? To make it the most effective. So if I'm in the big book every single day and I'm talking about my experience with the allergy and my experience of the thinking that precedes a relapse into drinking, and I'm listening to your experience with the allergy and your experience with the thinking that precedes a relapse into drinking, and also listening to you might even remind me of things that I didn't even remember. So I get a deeper understanding of it. But if I'm doing that every single day, guess what? I'm not going to believe the lie that I don't have the allergy because I've been talking about it all day with other alcoholics. That's how it treats my mind as an alcoholic. Now, again, when I'm engaged in a conversation with another human being, I am right there, right then with that person because we're talking about the book. I'm asking if you can relate to this. I'm asking what you think this means to you. I'm listening to your response to that. I'm giving you what it means to me. We're having a conversation which launches me into the present moment. The more time I spend in the present, the more time I spend in the now. The more time I spend in the now, the more time I spend in the truth. The more time I spend in the truth, the less time I spend in the lie. And that treats my mind just as being a human being. So I'm not writing stories when I'm out in the world, like doing shit, because I've spent so much time practicing being now that that is now my go-to, right? Now, treating the spirit. What does it mean to treat my spirit? Man, this was confusing to me. But to treat my spirit means to develop a relationship with, live in conscious contact with, and most importantly, gain access to the power of God, which is an infinite well of power. Okay, let me unpack that because we're talking about the service side of the triangle. If I described a God that loves me, wants the best for me, and takes care of me no matter what, then essentially what I'm describing is a universal power that is serving me at all times. The best way for me to develop a relationship with or live in conscious contact with the servant is to just practice being the servant. It's that simple. That's how I'm going to connect to that. We perfect and enlarge our spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, right? Now, the reason why that gives me an ultimate well of power, because they talk about, lack of power, that was our dilemma. But we have to find a power, right? It needs to be a power greater than self. Okay. So the only reason that I lack power today is if I am exerting power from self, which means I have expectations of reciprocation. I want something from you. There's an agenda. I'm manipulating because then I give you all the power. Because if you don't do what I want you to do, then I'm pissed. If it doesn't work out the way that I want it to work out, then I'm in fear, right? So what winds up happening is that if I'm just trying to be the blessing to every single person in every single situation that presents itself to me in each moment, besides being able to launch myself into the moment and experience freedom from this, and I don't have any expectation from any situation or person, then nothing has nothing has power over me. Um, I call it unfuckable with, right? Because nothing can mess with me, basically. And that is freedom and that is peace. Now, going back to ideas of being of service, right? At meetings, they told me get a commitment and be of service, right? So I, got the log cabin mopping commitment. Now, the problem with that kind of service was I couldn't guarantee that I was doing it and being selfless. And the selfless part of it is the most important piece because that's the part that gives me the power. And what I mean by that is that I could be mopping the floor at the end of the meeting of the log cabin and thinking to myself, wow, that speaker really sucked. Or why is that person always preaching? Or why is that person always whining? Or why is anybody talking to me? I feel really alone right now. Or is anybody noticing what a great job I'm doing mopping this floor? Like, why am I not getting a gold star? Like, it's got some extra shine on it today? So that's all self getting involved with a commitment that is supposed to be selfless, right? So I can't guarantee that that's going to be it. People told me, oh, well, drive newcomers from treatment centers to meetings, right? Okay, cool. Can I guarantee that self is not going to be involved in that? No. I could be picking up newcomers from treatment centers and taking them to meetings, but everything's fine and dandy until someday one of those newcomers spills a milkshake in my back seat. And I'm like, I hate this person, and they never contribute to gas, right? So self got involved there. Or, just call a bunch of alcoholics all day, or even my old version of sponsorship where I was fielding all these calls and pretending to be everyone's therapist all the time. Self was definitely involved in there because I would find myself spending all this time on the phone with someone, giving them all this advice, and then getting frustrated when they didn't follow it. And I'd be like, I told you what to do. Why are you calling me 2 days later with the same shit? Self is involved there. That's a problem. Or, last but not least, opening up doors for people at restaurants, just being kind out in the world. Everything is fine and dandy until someone walks through that door that I opened for them and they didn't say thank you. Or worse, they start yelling at me for being a misogynist. And I'm like, wait, what world are we living in? I'm just trying to be polite, right? Self is involved there, right? So I need to have a truly selfless practice. Now, the most selfless practice that I have found personally, and the only way that for me that I know for sure 100% that I'm working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason why I say the program is that I'm working all three sides of the triangle in one single session, is I take as many people through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous as I possibly can in my spare time. That's all I do, right? So I'm working all three sides of the triangle because every time I'm sitting across from a sober alcoholic, I'm treating my body. I'm reading the book with them, so I'm treating my mind. I'm teaching them the book. And really what I'm teaching them is underlines and highlights and circles and little notes that we write in there and having discussions. It's casual. I did not need to be a rocket scientist in big book knowledge to do that. I just needed to be able to read. And I could do that at any time, right? So taking people through the book, working all three sides of the triangle, I'm sure I'm working the program, right? Now,
Michaelis, 5 minutes.
cool. The reason why I know that it's selfless is because I didn't write the book. It's not my message. I didn't come up with the format. Still not even really my message, right? I could be having a horrible day and wake up in so much self, but still be able to show up to the big book session and have self removed, right? So I can't take credit for any of this, and it removes self from the situation. Also, I don't find myself trying to run people's lives because really what I'm doing is I'm letting the big book tell them to work with others so they can develop their own practice of a power greater than self so they're not dependent upon me. That way I'm not trying to be anyone's guru or anyone's dictator. I'm not doing any of that. I'm like, here's some pages, go pass them on to somebody else, right? As many people as you possibly can. Now, the magic of this process for me was not just like some of the things that we wrote in the big book and stuff like that. Like, this process is not to make me dependent on a sponsor, but to enable me to become dependent upon God. A sponsor can't save themselves. But really the magic was that Deezer told me, okay, after our very first session, we did an hour. We literally just did the cover page, which is what I just spent an hour describing to you guys, right? I asked him, what do I need to do now? Do I need to do some writing, or call you every day, or what's going on? All he said to me was like, you need to go out and pass this on to as many people as you possibly could. And I literally, my jaw dropped and I said, you're out of your fucking mind. We did a page. We haven't even read the text yet. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what this book says. He's like, just go do it and practice. So I did, because I was willing to try anything at that time. And the truth is that I got relief every single time because I got reprieve from my own thinking and myself, basically. And what I found is that as I read the rest of the big book, every other page of that big book just supported the master thesis of the circle and triangle. So my understanding of got it deeper, but it became an understanding from experience because I was actually working it. Now, if you're new in this room, the biggest lie that you will hear in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is that you cannot do what I'm describing to you until you've worked all 12 steps. And the reason why that's a lie is this. When Ebby talked to Bill, right? These are like pre-founders and founder of the program, right? When Ebby talked to Bill, Ebby had 60 days of sobriety and there was no real steps and there was no real book. It was just some word of mouth message. When Bill started working with people, that fool had a day of sobriety, right? When Bill and Bob started working with people, day of sobriety for Bob, right? So this was always an altruistic movement. And the other thing is that when the shit was hitting the fan. How Bill even met Bob was his life fell apart yet again in sobriety, right? He's in another state, business deal that he's like depending on for like, lifelong financial support falls through. And it doesn't say that in order to save himself, he suddenly realized he needed to go to a meeting. He needed to call a sponsor. He needed to write an inventory. He needed to pray and meditate. He needed to decorate a God box or write a gratitude list. It says in order to save himself, he needed to carry the message to another alcoholic. That is actually how we save ourselves, right? It says strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, is vital to permanent recovery. Now we have it easy today, right? Meetings were created off of people working with each other. Now we can just show up and log in on a link, and there's just a bunch of AA people in front of us that are untapped resource to pass the message on to. Not everybody in this room has read the book, no matter how much time that they had. So I just want to let you know, if you're new, you are useful. You have purpose. You have divine purpose, and that you have a message to carry. Like, don't let anyone infantilize you and tell you that, oh, you're not ready to work with others, because working with others is going to give you the freedom to be the person that you want to be and the person that they think you need to be in order to work with people. If we really understand what we are all just the light of God, which let us know that we are divine purpose. And being the light of God is really just being the extension of unconditional love, and taking someone through the book and giving them a practice to get outside of their own self is really the most simple and rudimentary way to spread unconditional love around this world. And we have that gift, right? And we are uniquely qualified no matter how much time we have. So I think that is my time. I love you guys so much. Thank you for having me. And yeah, thanks.
Yay.